When Lorraine Davis walked into Bella Rosa on that humid Tuesday morning and saw Dominic Salvatore sitting alone at table 7, the same table where he'd proposed to her 43 years ago, she knew the past she'd buried beneath decades of silence had finally come to collect its debt. Her hands trembled as she gripped her serving tray, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. Dominic looked older now, silver threading through his dark hair, fine lines mapping the corners of his eyes, but those eyes, sharp, calculating, impossibly green, hadn't changed at all. They found hers across the crowded dining room, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. "Lorraine," his voice carried across the morning bustle, smooth as aged whiskey. "We need to talk." She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, walk out those doors, and never look back. But Lorraine Davis hadn't survived 6 decades of life, raised 3 children alone, and built a reputation as the best waitress in Boston by running from hard truths. So instead, she straightened her spine, smoothed down her uniform, and walked toward him. If you're listening to this and want more stories like this one, don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next chapter of these incredible journeys. "What are you doing here?" Lorraine's voice came out steadier than she felt. "This restaurant belongs to me now," Dominic finished, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." The words hit her like a physical blow. Bella Rosa had been her sanctuary for 23 years, the place where she'd rebuilt her life after everything fell apart. The Martinelli family had treated her like one of their own. And now, you bought it. Not a question, a statement heavy with betrayal. When? 3 weeks ago. The Martinellis needed to retire. I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. A ghost of a smile played at his lips. The same smile that had once made her believe in fairy tales. But that's not why I'm here, Lorraine. I'm here because our daughter is getting married." The tray slipped from Lorraine's fingers, clattering against the table. Around them, conversations paused, heads turned, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the words he'd just spoken. "We don't have a daughter." Her whisper was fierce, desperate. "I never—" "You did," Dominic said softly, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a photograph and placed it on the table between them. "Her name is Sofia. She's 39 years old, and she's been looking for you her entire life." Lorraine stared at the photograph. The woman looking back at her had Lorraine's wide-set eyes, her high cheekbones, her full lips, but she had Dominic's smile, his distinctive nose, his commanding presence. The resemblance was unmistakable, undeniable, devastating. "This isn't possible," Lorraine's voice cracked. "The baby, they told me she died. The night she was born, the doctor said there were complications, that she didn't make it. I held her for 1 minute, and then they took her away, and I never—" The memories flooded back with vicious clarity, the sterile hospital room, the pitying looks from nurses, the crushing grief that had nearly killed her. "They lied to you," Dominic said, his jaw tightening. "Indeed, my father arranged it. He paid the doctor, falsified the death certificate, and had Sofia placed with a family in his organization. He couldn't allow his son to have a child with—" He stopped himself, but Lorraine heard what he didn't say. "With a black woman, with someone beneath their family's station, with someone who wasn't Italian, wasn't Catholic, wasn't part of their world. You knew." The accusation hung between them like smoke. "All these years, you knew she was alive, and you never told me. I didn't know, not until 6 months ago." Dominic leaned forward, his voice urgent. "My father died last year. In his papers, I found a sealed envelope marked Salvatore Sins. Inside was everything, the payoffs, the documents, Sofia's adoption records. He kept tabs on her whole life. He knew where she was, who raised her, everything. And he never said a word." Lorraine felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here." not in front of him. Why are you telling me this now? Because Sofia knows the truth. She hired a private investigator last year when her adoptive parents died. She found the falsified death certificate, tracked down the nurses who were paid off, followed the money trail back to my father. And now she knows about both of us. Dominic's hand moved across the table, almost touching hers before she pulled away. She wants to meet you, Lorraine. She wants to know her mother. The restaurant felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. Lorraine stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I can't. There's more. Dominic's voice stopped her mid-step. Sofia isn't just getting married. She's marrying into the Castellano family. And if you know anything about Boston organized crime, you know what that means. Lorraine turned slowly, dread pooling in her stomach. The Castellanos were the Salvatore's oldest rivals. For decades, the two families had maintained a tense peace, but everyone knew it was fragile, built on blood and fear rather than trust. This marriage, Dominic continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, could unite our families, or it could start a war that destroys everything. Sofia's adoptive parents raised her in the organization. She's not some innocent bystander, Lorraine. She's connected, she's powerful, and she's about to become the bridge between two empires. Why would she want to meet me? Lorraine heard herself ask. After everything, after being lied to, after being raised in your world, why would she care about a waitress from Roxbury? Dominic stood, pulling on his coat. Because before she walks down that aisle, she wants to know where she comes from, who she really is, and because, he paused, meeting her eyes, because she knows about what happened to your other children. The world stopped. Lorraine felt her knees weaken, and she gripped the edge of the table for support. What do you know about Marcus and Keisha? Everything. The single word carried the weight of confession. Benny, I know Marcus was accepted to Harvard, but couldn't afford to go. I know Keisha's daughter, your granddaughter, needed surgery 2 years ago and almost died because you didn't have insurance. I know you've worked 3 jobs for the last 4 decades, trying to give them the life they deserved. He paused. And I know that if my father hadn't interfered, if you and I had raised Sofia together, none of that would have happened. Lorraine sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. She thought of Marcus, brilliant and bitter, working at the post office instead of practicing law. She thought of Keisha, raising 2 kids alone in a 1-bedroom apartment, struggling with diabetes she couldn't afford to manage properly. She thought of all the nights she'd lain awake wondering if she'd made different choices, taken different paths, whether her children's lives would have turned out differently. And now here was proof that there had been another choice, another path, another daughter. Sofia wants to help them, Dominic said quietly. She's set up trust funds. She wants to pay off Marcus's debts, get Keisha proper medical care, send your grandchildren to private school. She has the resources. My father made sure of that. But she won't do any of it until she meets you, until she hears the truth from your own lips. The truth, Lorraine repeated hollowly. What truth? That I let them tell me my baby died. That I believed them because I was 21 and scared and alone. That I spent 40 years grieving a child who was alive the whole time. The truth about us, Dominic corrected. About what happened. About why you left. About... He stopped himself again, but this time Lorraine knew exactly what he meant. About the night she discovered what the Salvatore family really did. About the warehouse she'd wandered into by accident, looking for Dominic. About what she'd seen, the blood, the fear, the casual violence that defined his world. About the choice she'd made to run, to disappear, to protect the child she thought she was carrying from a life built on other people's suffering. Except the child had been taken anyway, raised in that very world she'd tried to escape, and now that child, grown, powerful, connected, wanted answers. When? Lorraine asked finally. "When does she want to meet?" "Saturday, at the wedding venue. She's arranged a private room." Dominic pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table. Inside is the address, the time, and a phone number. "If you decide to come, call that number first. There are security concerns." Lorraine stared at the envelope like it might explode. "And if I don't come?" "Then Sofia marries into the Castellano family without knowing who she really is, without understanding where she comes from. And you spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been." Dominic's voice softened. "I know I hurt you, Lorraine. I know my family destroyed what we had, but Sofia didn't ask for any of this. She deserves to know her mother." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing, the envelope my father left. It contained more than just adoption records. It contained evidence, proof of things he'd done, things that could bring down half the organization if they ever came to light. And according to the lawyer who gave me those documents, my father left specific instructions. If anything happens to Sofia before her wedding day, everything gets released to the FBI." The implication hung in the air like poison. Someone in one of the families, maybe both, didn't want this marriage to happen, which meant Sofia was in danger, which meant Lorraine's daughter, the child she'd mourned for 4 decades, might be about to die all over again, this time for real. Lorraine sat alone at table 7 for a long time after Dominic left, staring at the photograph of the daughter she'd never known. Customers came and went. Her manager asked if she was okay. She nodded, smiled, went through the motions of her shift on autopilot, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. That night, she sat in her small apartment in Roxbury, the photograph spread on her kitchen table alongside the envelope Dominic had given her. The address was for a luxury hotel in Back Bay, the kind of place where Lorraine would normally only enter through the service entrance. The time was 2 p.m. Saturday, 3 days away. She picked up her phone to call Marcus, then put it down. How could she explain this? How could she tell her son that he had a sister he'd never known about? That their family's poverty, their struggles, their pain, all of it might have been prevented if a rich white man hadn't decided a black woman wasn't good enough for his son? The anger came suddenly, white-hot and overwhelming. Lorraine gripped the edge of the table, her breath coming in sharp gasps. For 40 years, she'd told herself she'd made peace with what happened, that she'd moved on, built a life, found purpose in raising Marcus and Keisha, that the grief had faded into something manageable, but it had all been a lie. The grief hadn't faded. It had just been buried under layers of survival, of necessity, of the daily grind of working multiple jobs and paying bills and keeping her children fed and clothed and safe. And now those layers were being stripped away, exposing the raw wound underneath. Her daughter was alive. Her daughter had been alive this whole time, and someone had stolen 40 years of motherhood from both of them. Lorraine reached for the phone again, this time dialing the number on the card. It rang once before a woman answered. "Miss Davis?" The voice was professional, calm. "We've been expecting your call." "I need to know something first," Lorraine said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Why now? Why does Sofia want to meet me right before her wedding? Why not months ago, when she first found out?" There was a pause. "Then because she only recently learned about the threat against her life, and because the evidence Mr. Salvatore Sr. left behind. It doesn't just implicate the families. It implicates you." The phone nearly slipped from Lorraine's fingers. "What?" "There are photographs, Ms. Davis, from 43 years ago, of you at locations that connect you to family business. Mr. Salvatore Sr. was very thorough in documenting everything, including what you saw the night you left. If that evidence is released, you won't just learn about your daughter. You'll become a witness in a federal investigation that could send dozens of people to prison, including, potentially, Sofia herself." Lorraine's blood ran cold. I don't understand. I was never part of... I didn't know anything about... What you knew doesn't matter. What you saw does. And according to the photographs and witness statements Mr. Salvatore Sr. collected, you saw quite a lot. The woman's voice remained professional, but Lorraine detected a hint of something underneath. Pity. Warning. Mrs. Davis, if you come Saturday, you need to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just a mother-daughter reunion. This is a negotiation. Sofia wants to meet you. Yes. But she also wants to know if you can be trusted with what you know. If you can be trusted to stay silent. If you can be trusted not to destroy everything she's built. And if I can't be trusted, Lorraine asked, though she already knew the answer, then you become a problem that needs to be solved. The woman paused. I'm not trying to scare you, Ms. Davis. I'm trying to prepare you. The world Sofia was raised in, the world Dominic comes from, it doesn't forgive loose ends. And right now, you're a very significant loose end. The line went dead. Lorraine sat in the darkness of her apartment, her hands shaking. She thought about Marcus and Keisha, about her grandchildren, about the quiet life she'd built on the ashes of her broken dreams. She thought about walking away, ignoring the address in the envelope, pretending this conversation had never happened, but then she looked at the photograph again. At Sofia's eyes, her eyes, staring back at her across 4 decades of silence, and she knew she was going to that meeting. Not because it was safe, not because it was smart, but because she was a mother. And mothers didn't abandon their children, no matter how much time had passed. No matter how dangerous the world they inhabited, even if it killed them. The next morning, Lorraine called in sick to work for the first time in 15 years. She spent the day at the Boston Public Library, using the computers to research everything she could find about Sofia Castellano, born Sofia Russo, adopted at birth by Antonio and Maria Russo, both now deceased. What she found was both impressive and terrifying. Sofia had graduated from MIT with degrees in mathematics and computer science. She'd worked briefly for a tech company before returning to Boston and becoming involved in family business, though what exactly that business was remained carefully vague in all public records. She'd been engaged twice before. Both engagements had ended abruptly, both former fiancés had left Boston shortly after C, and neither had ever spoken publicly about what happened. 3 years ago, she'd taken over several legitimate businesses formerly run by the Russo family, restaurants, construction companies, waste management firms. All of them now ran at a profit, all of them employed hundreds of people, and all of them, according to the whispers in online forums dedicated to organized crime, were fronts for money laundering. But what struck Lorraine most was a photograph from a charity gala 2 years ago. Sofia stood at a podium, giving a speech about funding after-school programs in underserved communities. She wore an elegant black dress, her hair pulled back, her expression confident and commanding. And in her eyes, those same eyes Lorraine saw in her own mirror every day, was something Lorraine recognized immediately. Loneliness. The bone-deep loneliness of someone who'd never quite belonged anywhere, who'd always felt like they were playing a role, wearing a mask, pretending to be someone they weren't. Lorraine knew that feeling intimately. She'd spent her whole adult life straddling 2 worlds, too educated for the neighborhood she'd grown up in, too poor and too black for the world Dominic had come from, always the outsider, always aware of how precarious her position was. Her daughter had inherited that same duality. Raised by an Italian family, connected to organized crime, powerful and wealthy, but never quite Italian enough, never quite white enough, never quite one of them. Always other, always separate. The realization broke something open inside Lorraine's chest. Whatever else Sofia was, whatever she'd done, she was still that little girl who'd never known her real mother, who'd grown up with questions no one could answer, who'd looked in the mirror and wondered where she came from, who she really was, why she'd been given away. Lorraine closed the laptop and made a decision. She was going to that meeting, but she wasn't going unarmed. She was going to tell her daughter the truth, all of it. About Dominic, about that night at the warehouse, about the choice she'd made to run, about the grief, the guilt, the 4 decades of wondering what if. And if that truth made her a liability, if it put her in danger, then so be it. She'd spent 40 years living with lies. She was done. On Friday afternoon, Lorraine sat down with Marcus and Keisha in her living room and told them everything. About Dominic Salvatore, about the pregnancy, about the daughter they'd been told died at birth, about the truth that had just resurfaced. Marcus reacted with fury. "You're telling me we have a sister? A sister who's been alive this whole time, a sister who's part of the mob." He paced the small room, his hands clenched into fists. "And now she wants to meet you, after 40 years. What gives her the right?" "She was stolen from me," Lorraine interrupted quietly. "She didn't choose any of this, Marcus. She was a baby. She didn't ask to be taken, didn't ask to be raised in that world. She's a victim in this just as much as I am." Keisha was quieter, more thoughtful. "This money she wants to give us, the trust funds, that's guilt money, Mama. Blood money. We can't take that. Can't we?" Lorraine met her daughter's eyes. "You think your pride is worth more than your children's education, more than your health, Marcus. You think your anger is worth more than finally having the life you should have had." "It's not about pride," Keisha said softly. "It's about who we are. We're not part of that world, Mama. We never have been. If we take that money, we become part of it. We become complicit." Lorraine understood. She'd had the same thought herself, but she'd also watched her children struggle for decades, watched Marcus's dreams die slowly, watched Keisha's health deteriorate, watched her grandchildren make do with less because that was all their family could afford. "I'm meeting her tomorrow," Lorraine said finally. "I'm going to look my daughter in the eye and tell her the truth about where she came from, about who I am, about who we are. And then I'm going to let her make her own choices about what happens next, because that's what mothers do. We give our children the truth, and we trust them to find their own way. Even if that way leads them deeper into organized crime," Marcus asked bitterly. "Even then," Lorraine stood, her voice firm, "because she's my daughter, and I lost 40 years with her already. I'm not losing one more day." That night, Lorraine barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what she would say. How do you condense 40 years of grief into a conversation? How do you explain to your daughter why you weren't there? How do you bridge a gap that wide, that deep, that painful? Saturday morning dawned clear and cold. Lorraine dressed carefully in her best outfit, a simple navy dress she'd bought for Keisha's high school graduation 15 years ago, paired with the pearl earrings her own mother had given her before she died. She wanted to look like herself, not wealthy, not powerful, just a woman who'd worked hard and raised her children and survived. The hotel in Back Bay was exactly as intimidating as she'd expected. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, staff in crisp uniforms who looked at her with barely concealed assessment. Lorraine walked through the lobby with her head high, ignoring the stairs, following the instructions she'd been given. 3rd floor, room 312, knock 3 times. The door opened immediately. The woman on the other side was young, blonde, wearing a tailored suit and an earpiece. Miss Davis, right on time. "I'll need you to step through the metal detector, please." Lorraine hadn't expected that, but she complied. The scanner beeped clear, and the woman gestured her forward into a suite that was larger than Lorraine's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Charles River. A crystal vase held 24 white roses, and sitting on a cream-colored sofa, backlit by the afternoon sun, was Sofia. She stood as Lorraine entered, and for a long moment neither of them moved. They simply looked at each other, taking in the reality of this moment they'd both imagined but never quite believed would happen. Sofia was tall, nearly 5'10", with Lorraine's rich brown skin and Dominic's aristocratic features. She wore a white cashmere sweater and tailored slacks, her natural hair in an elegant updo. Diamond studs glinted in her ears. Everything about her screamed wealth, power, confidence, but her hands trembled as she clasped them in front of her. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Sofia said finally. Her voice was lower than Lorraine expected, with a hint of Boston accent underneath the polish. "I wasn't sure either," Lorraine admitted, "right up until I walked through that door." Sofia gestured to the sofa across from her. "Please, sit. Would you like anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine." Lorraine sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She'd spent her whole life in rooms where she didn't belong, had learned long ago how to carry herself with dignity even when she felt small. Sofia sat too, and for another long moment, silence hung between them. "I don't know how to do this," Sofia said finally, her composure cracking slightly. "I've rehearsed what I wanted to say 1,000 times, but now that you're here, everything I planned seems wrong." "Then don't rehearse," Lorraine suggested gently. "Just talk to me. Ask me what you want to know." Sofia's eyes, Lorraine's eyes, filled with tears. "Did you want me before they told you I died? Did you want me?" The question hit Lorraine like a physical blow. "Oh, baby, yes. God, yes. You were the most wanted thing in my whole world. Then why—" Sofia's voice broke. "Why didn't you fight for me? When they said I died, why didn't you demand to see my body? Why didn't you question it?" Lorraine felt her own tears start to fall. "Because I was 21 years old and terrified. Because I'd just given birth alone in a hospital where no one spoke to me kindly. Because the doctor who told me you'd died looked me in the eye and said there had been complications, that you'd never taken a breath, that it was better this way. And because—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "Because what?" "Because a part of me believed him. Believed that maybe it was better, that a baby born to an unwed black woman and a mobster's son didn't have much of a future anyway." Lorraine forced herself to meet Sofia's eyes. "I was ashamed of getting pregnant, of falling for Dominic, of being naive enough to think his family would ever accept me, and that shame made me weak when I should have been strong." Sofia wiped at her eyes roughly. "I need you to tell me everything, about you and Dominic, about what happened, about why you left." So Lorraine did. She told Sofia about meeting Dominic at a fundraiser where she'd been working coat check to pay for college, about how he'd asked her to dinner, how they'd started seeing each other in secret because his family would never approve, about falling in love despite knowing it was impossible. She told her about getting pregnant, about Dominic's promise that they'd run away together, start over somewhere new, about believing him because she wanted so desperately for it to be true. And then she told her about that night, about going to the warehouse to surprise Dominic with the news of the pregnancy, about what she'd seen when she opened that door. "There were 3 men," Lorraine said quietly. "2 of them held a 4th man down, while your father—" She couldn't finish, couldn't describe the violence, the blood, the casual cruelty in Dominic's eyes as he'd hurt that man. "You saw him kill someone," Sofia said flatly, not a question. "I don't know if the man died. I ran before it was over. I went home, packed a bag and disappeared. I didn't tell Dominic about the pregnancy, didn't tell anyone. I just ran." Lorraine's voice was thick with old guilt. 2 weeks later, I realized I was still pregnant. I thought about getting rid of it, but I couldn't. So I moved to a different neighborhood, got a job, planned to have you and raise you alone. But his father found you anyway. He found me in the hospital. I don't know how. Maybe he'd had someone following me. Maybe he'd been watching Dominic, looking for loose ends. But he was there. And after you were born, after I'd held you for 60 seconds and they took you for tests, He came into my room with the doctor, and they told me you died." Sofia stood abruptly, moving to the window. Her shoulders were rigid, her hands clenched at her sides. "The couple who raised me, the Russos, they were good people. They loved me. But I always knew I didn't quite fit. I looked different, sounded different, thought different, and when I got older and started asking questions, they'd get this look, this guilty, frightened look, like they knew something I didn't." "When did you find out the truth?" 6 months ago. My adoptive father died of a heart attack. My mother followed 3 weeks later. Couldn't live without him. When I was going through their papers, I found adoption documents that didn't match my birth certificate. Different dates, different hospital. So I hired an investigator. Sofia turned back to face Lorraine. It took him 4 months to track down the truth. The falsified death certificate, the payoffs to the doctor and nurses, the connection to Dominic Salvatore Sr., everything. And then you found Dominic. I confronted him, demanded answers. At first he tried to lie, to protect his father's memory, but I showed him what I'd found, and he... Sofia's voice caught. He broke down, told me everything. About you, about what his father had done, about how he'd spent 40 years thinking I was dead too. Lorraine absorbed this. He didn't know you were alive. Not until I walked into his office 6 months ago, looking exactly like you. Sofia's laugh was bitter. You should have seen his face. He thought he was seeing a ghost. Is that why you're marrying into the Castellano family? To punish him? Sofia's eyes widened slightly. Who told you that? No one. I'm just a mother who knows what it's like to be angry at the people who hurt you. Lorraine stood, moving closer to her daughter. But Sofia, if you're doing this for revenge, I'm doing this because I love him. Sofia's voice was fierce. Marco Castellano. I met him 2 years ago at a business conference. He didn't know who I was, didn't care about my connections or my money. He saw me, the real me, and I love him for that. But the timing is complicated, yes. The families think this marriage will unite them, end decades of rivalry, create a new power structure. Sofia met Lorraine's eyes. But that's not why I'm doing it. I'm marrying Marco because when I'm with him, I don't feel like an outsider. I don't feel like I'm playing a role. I feel like myself. Lorraine heard the longing in her daughter's voice and recognized it bone deep. Does he know? About me? About what you found out? He knows everything. And he wants me to do whatever I need to do to find peace with it. Sofia paused. The question is, what do you need? What I need, Lorraine said slowly, is to know that you're okay. That despite everything that happened, despite being taken from me, despite being raised in a world I tried to protect you from, that you're okay. I'm not okay, Sofia admitted. I'm angry. I'm confused. I feel like my whole life has been a lie, but I'm also... She gestured helplessly. I'm here. I'm alive. I have people who love me. I have resources to help people, to make a difference. Is that enough? Before Lorraine could answer, there was a sharp knock at the door. The blonde woman from before entered quickly, her expression tense. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. There's been a development with the Castellano matter. Marco needs to speak with you immediately. Sofia's entire demeanor changed, shifting from vulnerable daughter to controlled businesswoman in an instant. What kind of development? The kind we discuss in private. The woman's eyes flicked to Lorraine, the message clear. But Sofia shook her head. She stays. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my mother. The word hung in the air. Mother. Sofia had called her mother. And despite everything, the lost years, the pain, the impossible situation they were in, Lorraine felt something crack open inside her chest. The woman hesitated, then spoke quickly. Marco's been arrested. Federal agents picked him up an hour ago on RICO charges. They're saying they have evidence connecting him to money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy. The wedding... Is off, Sofia finished, her voice hollow. At least for now. There's more. The arrests aren't stopping with Marco. They're moving on multiple members of both families simultaneously. Someone leaked information to the FBI. Detailed financial records, wire transcripts, witness statements, everything. Lorraine felt the blood drain from her face. The documents, the ones Dominic's father left behind. Sofia turned to her sharply. How do you know about those? The woman who called me, she said if anything happened to you before the wedding, everything would be released to the FBI. She said those documents implicated me too, that there were photographs from 40 years ago that could make me a witness. The blonde woman and Sofia exchanged a long look. Then Sofia asked, very carefully, what else did she tell you? That I was a loose end, that I needed to prove I could be trusted to stay silent. Lorraine's mind was racing. But if the documents have already been released, if the FBI already has them, then that means someone decided you couldn't be trusted after all, Sofia finished grimly. Or someone wanted to ensure the wedding didn't happen and use the documents as their weapon. Who would do that? The question isn't who would do it, the blonde woman said. The question is, who benefits? The wedding was supposed to unite the families. With it off, with both sides scrambling to deal with federal investigations, with trust broken. The power vacuum, Sofia breathed. Someone's making a play to take over while everyone else is distracted. She turned to Lorraine. Did Dominic tell you anything else? Anything about what was in those documents besides your involvement? Lorraine shook her head. Just that they could bring down half the organization. Not half, Sofia said quietly. All of it. My grandfather, Dominic's father, he spent 50 years documenting everything. Every murder, every scheme, every dirty cop and paid-off politician. He did it as insurance, as leverage. But he never intended for it to actually be released. So who released it? The answer came to Lorraine even as she asked the question. She saw it reflected in Sofia's eyes. There was only one person who would have access to those documents. Only one person who would benefit from destroying both families. Only one person who'd spent 40 years thinking his daughter was dead and might want revenge on the father who'd caused that grief. Dominic, Lorraine whispered. Sofia nodded slowly. He loved you. Even after you left, even after all these years, I could see it in his eyes when he talked about you, and he spent his whole life hating his father for what he did, for taking away his child, for ruining his chance at happiness, for making him into... She gestured to encompass the whole situation. He's destroying everything, Lorraine said. The families, the organization, his own legacy, all of it. Not everything, the blonde woman corrected. Just the old guard, the people loyal to his father's vision. But Dominic's built relationships outside the traditional structure. Legitimate businesses, political connections, alliances with younger members who want to go clean. If the old organization burns down, he'll be positioned to rebuild something new from the ashes. Sofia laughed bitterly. He's not just getting revenge. He's staging a coup, and he used my wedding as the catalyst. He used me, Lorraine realized with growing horror. He brought me here, told me about you, set up this meeting. All to ensure I'd be connected to what happened, to make sure when the documents came out, there'd be a narrative, the tragic love story, the stolen child, the grieving father finally taking justice. It's brilliant, actually, the blonde woman admitted. The media will eat it up. Poor Dominic Salvatore, whose racist father stole his child and the woman he loved, who spent 40 years trying to reform the organization from within, only to finally expose its corruption when his daughter's life was threatened. He comes out looking like a hero. While Marco goes to prison, Sofia said flatly, while my wedding gets cancelled, She stopped herself, but Lorraine could see the truth in her daughter's eyes. While you lose another family, Lorraine finished softly, while you lose the man you love, while you discover your biological father manipulated you just like his father manipulated me." Sofia sank back onto the sofa, her composure finally crumbling completely. "I don't know who to trust anymore. I don't know who I am anymore. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about Dominic, about my place in all of this, it's all a lie." Lorraine sat beside her daughter and did the only thing she could think of. She pulled Sofia into her arms and held her while she cried. The hug was awkward at first. 40 years of absence couldn't be erased in a moment. But then Sofia leaned into her, and Lorraine felt the weight of her daughter's grief, her fear, her desperate need for something real in a world built on lies. "I can't tell you who to trust," Lorraine said quietly. "I can't give you back the years we lost. I can't fix what's broken, but I can tell you this, you're my daughter. And whatever happens next, whatever you decide to do, I'm here. I'm not running away again." Sofia pulled back, wiping at her eyes. "Even if staying puts you in danger, even if my world drags you into places you swore you'd never go again, even then." Lorraine cupped her daughter's face in her hands. "Because I already lost you once. I'm not losing you again. Not to Dominic's schemes, not to federal investigations, not to anything." The blonde woman cleared her throat gently. "I hate to interrupt, but we need to make decisions quickly. If Dominic is behind the leak, he'll have anticipated Sofia's response. He'll have plans in place for every possible move." "What are our options?" Sofia asked, her voice steadier now. "Option 1. We cooperate with the FBI. Turn over everything we know about both families, confirm the documents, authenticity, trade information for immunity and witness protection." "No," Sofia said immediately. "That's what Dominic wants. That's the path that destroys everything and lets him rebuild." Option 2. We fight. We hire the best lawyers money can buy. We challenge every piece of evidence. We create enough reasonable doubt to keep Marco and the others out of prison. It'll take years and cost millions, but it's possible. And option 3, the blonde woman hesitated. Option 3 is the dangerous one. We find out who Dominic's working with, who his allies are in this new structure he's building, and we expose them before they can consolidate power. We burn down his plans, the way he's trying to burn down the old organization. That's essentially declaring war on Dominic, Lorraine said. As on a man with 40 years of experience in this world, a man who's smart enough to orchestrate all of this. Yes, the blonde woman agreed, which is why we'd need leverage. Something he values more than his plans, more than his revenge, more than anything. Sofia turned to Lorraine, and in her daughter's eyes, Lorraine saw a terrible understanding dawning. "Me," Lorraine said quietly. "I'm the leverage." "You're the one thing he can't anticipate," the blonde woman confirmed. "The one piece of his plan he can't control. Because he doesn't know what you'll do. Whether you'll forgive him, condemn him, or something else entirely, and more importantly, he doesn't know what you mean to Sofia. If he thinks there's even a chance Sofia might side with you over him, then his whole narrative falls apart," Sofia finished. The tragic father trying to protect his daughter becomes the manipulative mobster using his daughter for his own ends. Lorraine felt the weight of what they were suggesting settle over her. They wanted her to become bait, to put herself between Dominic and his plans, to risk everything, her safety, her other children's safety, her quiet life, to save a daughter she'd just met. The smart thing would be to walk away, to tell Sofia she was sorry, but this was too much, too dangerous, too far beyond what any reasonable person would ask, to go back to her apartment in Roxbury and her job at the restaurant and pretend this whole impossible day had never happened. But when Lorraine looked at her daughter, at this strong, broken, brilliant woman, who'd survived being stolen from her mother, who'd built a life in a world that must have always made her feel like an outsider, who was asking not for Lorraine to save her, but simply to stand with her, the choice became clear. "Tell me what I need to do," Lorraine said. The plan took shape over the next hour. It was risky, possibly insane, and depended on a lot of things going right that could easily go catastrophically wrong. But it was all they had. Lorraine would call Dominic and ask to meet with him privately. She'd tell him she needed to understand why he'd really brought her back into his life, whether it was genuine concern for Sofia or something else. She'd appeal to the man she'd once loved, the man who'd promised to run away with her all those years ago. "He'll know it's a trap," the blonde woman warned. "He's too smart to fall for simple manipulation." "It's not manipulation," Lorraine countered. "It's the truth. I do need to understand his motivations, and he needs to hear what I have to say about what he's done." While Lorraine kept Dominic occupied, Sofia and her team would work to identify his allies and gather evidence of the new structure he was building. If they could prove he'd leaked the documents himself, that he was using the investigation to eliminate competition rather than expose genuine corruption, they could undermine his entire plan. "And if we can't prove it?" Sofia asked. "Then we go to plan B," the blonde woman said grimly. "We disappear, all of us, new identities, new lives, somewhere Dominic and the FBI can't find us." "That's not a plan B," Lorraine objected. "That's just running away again." "And I'm done running." The phone call to Dominic was shorter than expected. He agreed to meet her that evening at Bella Rosa, the restaurant he now owned, the place where this had all started 43 years ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them. "He'll have security there," the blonde woman said. "We can't protect you inside." "I don't need protection from Dominic," Lorraine said, though she wasn't entirely sure she believed it. "He's never hurt me physically. That's not how he operates." "There are other ways to hurt people," Sofia said quietly. "Trust me, I know." Lorraine spent the hours before the meeting with her daughter, filling in the gaps of 40 years. She showed Sofia photographs of Marcus and Keisha, told stories about raising them alone, about the jobs she'd worked and the struggles she'd faced. In return, Sofia shared memories of her childhood with the Russos, of realizing she was different, of building walls to protect herself from a world that never quite accepted her. By the time Lorraine left for Bella Rosa, something had shifted between them. They weren't quite mother and daughter, not yet, maybe not ever in the traditional sense, but they were something. Connected by blood and loss, and a shared understanding of what it meant to survive in spaces where you didn't belong. Bella Rosa was closed when Lorraine arrived at 8 p.m., but the door was unlocked. She walked through the empty dining room, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor, and found Dominic sitting at table 7. 2 wine glasses sat on the table, a bottle of red already opened between them. "I remember the first time I brought you here," Dominic said as she sat down. "You wore a green dress. You were so nervous you knocked over your water glass." "I remember too." Lorraine accepted the wine he poured for her, but didn't drink. "I also remember you promising me that night that your family wouldn't be a problem, that we could make it work. I believed that then." Dominic swirled his wine, watching the light play through it. "I was young and stupid and in love. I thought love could overcome anything. But it couldn't overcome your father." "No." His voice was heavy with old grief. "It couldn't. And by the time I realized that, you were gone. Disappeared. I spent months trying to find you. Hired investigators, paid off cops, called in every favor I had. But it was like you'd vanished off the face of the earth. I got good at disappearing," Lorraine said. "Look, it had to be to survive. And all that time, my father knew where you were pregnant, knew you'd had our daughter." Dominic's hands tightened around his glass. "He knew, and he let me grieve. Let me think I'd lost everything. Let me spend 40 years believing the woman I loved and our child were dead." "So you decided to destroy everything he built?" Dominic's eyes snapped to hers. "Sofia told you." "She figured it out." "We both did." Lorraine leaned forward. "The documents, the FBI investigation, the timing with the wedding, it's all you. You leaked your father's files to take down the organization he spent his life building, and you brought me into it to give yourself cover. The tragic love story to distract from what you're really doing." For a long moment, Dominic said nothing. Then he laughed, the sound bitter and raw. "I forget how smart you are. Always did underestimate you. My father did too. Is that a confession?" "It's an explanation." Dominic stood, moving to the window overlooking the street. "My father didn't just take our daughter, Lorraine. He took my life. Every choice I made after that night when you left was shaped by trying to fill the hole you and Sofia left behind. I threw myself into the family business, became everything he wanted me to be, built an empire on blood and fear, because what else was there? You could have walked away. Could I?" He turned back to her. "Could you have walked away from Marcus and Keisha? Could you have just decided one day that motherhood was too hard and left? That's different. They needed me, and the families needed me. Hundreds of people depending on the organizations we run. Businesses, jobs, neighborhoods. If I'd walked away, someone worse would have taken over. So I stayed, and I tried to make things better from inside. Tried to move us toward legitimate business, away from the violence and corruption. But my father's generation, they wouldn't let go, wouldn't evolve. So you decided to force them out. I decided to give them the same choice they gave me, burn everything down or adapt." Dominic's voice was hard now. "The documents I released don't just incriminate the old guard, Lorraine. They expose 40 years of corruption, of politicians and cops on the take, of systems designed to protect the powerful. Real change doesn't happen incrementally in this world. It happens when everything breaks and you get a chance to rebuild. And Sofia, Marco, their wedding, what about them? Sofia is stronger than you think. She'll survive this. And Marco, if he really loves her, he'll understand what I'm trying to do. He'll see that this is about creating a better future. Or he'll see a man willing to sacrifice his daughter's happiness for revenge." Lorraine stood, facing Dominic across the table. "You want to know the difference between you and your father. He took our daughter to protect his legacy. You're destroying dozens of lives to destroy his, but you're both willing to use Sofia as a means to an end. You're both willing to hurt the people you claim to love to get what you want." The words hit harder than she'd intended. She saw Dominic flinch, saw something crumble in his expression. "I'm trying to protect her," he said quietly. The old organization would never have truly accepted her. She would always have been other, always suspect. But if I can build something new, something she can lead. Did you ask her if that's what she wants? Or did you just decide for her, the way your father decided for both of us? Silence fell between them. Outside, rain had started to fall, droplets racing down the window like tears. "What do you want me to do?" Dominic asked finally. "Tell me what you want, and I'll do it." It was the same promise he'd made 43 years ago. The same promise he'd broken. "I want you to stop," Lorraine said simply. "Stop the investigation. Find a way to make it go away. Let Sofia marry Marco if that's what she wants. Let her make her own choices about her life, her future. Stop trying to protect her from a world you created. I can't stop what's already in motion. The FBI has the documents. The arrests have been made. But you have connections, lawyers, political allies. You said yourself you spent 40 years building legitimate power. Use it, not to protect yourself, not to build some new empire, just to give your daughter the life she deserves." "And what about you?" Dominic asked. "What do you want for yourself?" Lorraine thought about Marcus and Keisha, about her grandchildren, about the quiet life she'd built. Then she thought about Sofia. Brilliant, lonely, powerful Sofia who'd never quite belonged anywhere. "I want to know my daughter," Lorraine said. "I want the chance to be her mother. Even if it's 40 years too late, I want to help her navigate whatever comes next. And I want you to promise me, really promise me this time, that you'll put her happiness above your plans." Dominic crossed to her slowly. Up close, she could see the weight of 4 decades on his face. The lines, the grey hair, the tired eyes, but underneath she could still see the young man who'd asked her to dinner all those years ago. The man who'd promised her the world. "I loved you," he said quietly. "But I love you still. And I would do anything, burn down everything I've built, spend the rest of my life in prison, anything, if it would give us back what we lost." "We can't get it back," Lorraine said, tears streaming down her face. "It's gone, Dominic. Our daughter is grown. We're different people now. All we can do is try to build something new with the time we have left." He reached out, hesitating, then gently wiped the tears from her cheek. Tell me how to do that. Tell me how to make this right." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of lawyers, negotiations, and tense conversations behind closed doors. Dominic worked his connections, calling in favors from politicians and judges who owed him. The FBI investigation didn't disappear. It couldn't, not with the evidence that had been released. But the scope narrowed. Instead of sweeping RICO charges against dozens of people, prosecutors focused on specific crimes by specific individuals, most of them from the older generation, most of them the ones who'd resisted change. Marco was released after 36 hours. The charges against him dropped due to insufficient evidence. Dominic's lawyers argued that he'd been named in documents created decades before he was even involved in family business, that his only crime was being born into the wrong family. It wasn't quite true, but it was true enough for prosecutors who were suddenly facing political pressure to focus their resources elsewhere. The wedding was rescheduled for 3 weeks later. A smaller ceremony this time, more intimate. Just family, real family, not the sprawling network of the organization. Lorraine spent those 3 weeks getting to know her daughter. They had coffee together every morning at a cafe in the North End. They walked along the Charles River and talked about everything. Marcus and Keisha, Sofia's childhood, Lorraine's jobs and struggles, Sofia's education and work. They shared stories and silences, laughter and tears, and slowly, tentatively, they began to build something. Not the mother-daughter relationship they'd missed. That was impossible to recreate. But something new, something forged from loss and truth, and the choice to move forward rather than stay mired in the past. On the morning of the wedding, Lorraine stood in Sofia's suite at the hotel, helping her daughter into her dress. It was a simple gown, elegant and understated, nothing like the elaborate affair the first wedding would have been. "Are you sure about this?" Lorraine asked, fastening the tiny buttons along Sofia's spine. "About Marco, about everything." "I'm not sure about anything," Sofia admitted, "but I love him, and he loves me. And we've both seen enough of this world to know that love, real love, the kind worth fighting for, is rare. I'm not giving it up just because the timing is complicated. Your father is trying, you know. He really is trying to do better." Sofia met Lorraine's eyes in the mirror. "I know, and I appreciate it. But he's got a long way to go before I can trust him, before I can think of him as anything other than the man who manipulated both of us." "Give him time," Lorraine suggested. "Give yourself time too. This is all so new, so raw. You don't have to decide right now how you feel about Dominic or me or any of this." "What about you?" Sofia turned to face her. "How do you feel about him?" Lorraine considered the question carefully. "I loved who he was, or who I thought he was. I can't love who he became. But maybe I can learn to understand him, to see him clearly, without the romance or the anger, to accept that he's flawed and complicated and still deserving of compassion. That sounds very mature and healthy. Don't give me too much credit. I still want to throttle him half the time." Lorraine smiled. "But I'm trying for you, for us, for the family we're trying to build." The ceremony was beautiful, small but perfect. Marco's family attended, and surprisingly, so did several members of the Salvatore organization who'd survived the investigation. They sat separately from the Castellanos, the old tension still visible in the careful distance they maintained. But they were there. They were trying. Dominic walked Sofia down the aisle, and Lorraine watched from the front row with Marcus and Keisha beside her. Her son and daughter had finally met their sister 2 weeks ago. It had been awkward and emotional and complicated, but they'd all shown up. They'd all chosen to try. When the officiant asked who gave the bride away, Dominic spoke clearly, "Her mother and I do." He met Lorraine's eyes across the aisle, and something passed between them. Not forgiveness, exactly, not reconciliation, but acknowledgement, understanding, a shared commitment to do better for the daughter they'd both failed in different ways. The reception was held in a garden behind the hotel. Lorraine found herself at a table with Dominic, watching Sofia and Marco dance their first dance as a married couple. "She's happy," Dominic said quietly. "She is," Lorraine agreed. "I never thought I'd see her smile like that. Never thought I'd get to be part of her happiness." "You almost weren't." Lorraine kept her voice gentle but honest. "You almost destroyed it all for revenge." "I know." Dominic was quiet for a moment. "I spent 40 years thinking the best part of my life was dead. And when I found out she was alive, when I found out what my father had done, all I could think about was making him pay. Making everyone who'd been part of it pay. And now I think maybe the best revenge isn't destruction. Maybe it's this, building something real, something good. Proving that despite everything he did, despite all the ways he tried to poison our lives, love survived anyway." Lorraine reached over and squeezed his hand briefly. Not a romantic gesture, not forgiveness. Just the acknowledgement of shared history, shared grief, and maybe the beginning of shared healing. Later, Sofia found Lorraine standing alone by the garden fountain. She'd changed out of her wedding dress into a simpler gown for the reception. Her natural hair now loose and free around her shoulders. "I wanted to thank you," Sofia said, "for coming back, for staying, for fighting for me when you didn't have to." "You're my daughter," Lorraine said simply. "I'll always fight for you." "I know I'm not. I mean, we're not." Sofia struggled for words. "We didn't have the usual mother-daughter relationship. We can't go back and create those memories. But maybe we can create new ones," Lorraine finished. "Starting now, starting today." Sofia pulled something from her pocket and handed it to Lorraine. It was a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with 3 intertwined circles. "In day past, present and future," Sofia explained. "We can't change what happened, but we can choose what happens next, and I choose you. I choose us. I choose this family we're building." Lorraine fastened the necklace around her neck, tears streaming down her face for what felt like the 100th time that day. "I choose us, too." They stood together, watching the celebration, mother and daughter reunited after 40 years of absence. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The past couldn't be erased. The pain couldn't be undone. Dominic's actions still had consequences rippling through multiple families. The FBI investigation was ongoing. Nothing was simple or clean or resolved. But they were together, and that was a start. 3 months later, Lorraine sat in her apartment with an unexpected visitor. Marcus had called ahead to say someone wanted to meet her, someone she needed to hear out. The woman who entered was in her 60s, elegant and composed, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Miss Davis, my name is Catherine Russo. I was Maria Russo's sister, Sofia's adoptive mother." Lorraine offered her coffee, her mind racing. What could this woman possibly want? "I know this is unexpected," Catherine said, settling into the chair across from Lorraine. "But there's something you need to know. Something Maria made me promise to tell you if Sofia ever found you." "What is it?" Catherine pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age. "Maria knew. About the adoption, about how Sofia came to them. She knew it was wrong, that Dominic's father had stolen your child, and it tortured her. Lorraine took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, dated 20 years ago, written in careful cursive. To Sofia's birth mother, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if my sister will ever be brave enough to give it to you. But I need you to know that I tried to love your daughter the way you would have. I tried to give her everything. Security, education, love. But I always knew she wasn't truly mine. When she was 5, she asked me why she looked different from us. I lied. I told her she took after a distant relative, but she knew I was lying. She always knew. I'm writing this because I'm sick. The doctors say I might not have much time, and I need you to know that if I could go back, if I could undo what we did, taking your child, raising her as our own, I would. Not because she wasn't a blessing. She is, but because I see the questions in her eyes, the loneliness, the sense that she doesn't quite belong. She deserves to know where she came from, who you are, why you didn't keep her. And when she finds out the truth, when she learns that you didn't give her away, that she was taken, I hope you'll forgive her for any anger she might feel, for any blame she might direct at you. I'm not asking for forgiveness for myself. What we did was wrong, and I've carried that guilt every day since. I'm just asking you to understand that we loved her. Imperfectly, selfishly, but genuinely. I hope she finds you someday. I hope you get the chance to know each other. And I hope you can both find peace with what happened. Maria Russo Lorraine's hands trembled as she finished reading. She wrote this 20 years ago. She made me promise not to give it to you unless Sofia found you herself. She didn't want to interfere, didn't want to cause more pain, but she wanted you to know that she understood, that she was sorry. Did Sofia know about the guilt, about how Maria felt? I don't think so. Maria hid it well. She loved Sofia fiercely, never wanted her to feel like she was a burden or a mistake. Catherine paused. But in the last few months before she died, she talked about you constantly, wondering where you were, if you were okay, if you'd ever known your daughter had survived. Lorraine wiped at her eyes. Thank you for bringing this, for keeping your promise to her. There's one more thing, Catherine hesitated. The trust fund Sofia mentioned, the money for your other children, that wasn't Sofia's idea, it was Maria's. She left instructions in her will that when Sofia turned 35, she was to be given access to a special account, an account Maria had been funding for years, specifically to help Sofia's biological siblings if they were ever found. The revelation took Lorraine's breath away. Maria was going to tell her. I think Maria always planned to tell her. Once Sofia was old enough to understand, once the people who arranged the adoption, Dominic's father, the doctor, the others, were dead and couldn't retaliate, but she died before she got the chance. Lorraine looked at the letter again, reading between the lines. Maria Russo had lived for 40 years with the knowledge that she'd raised someone else's stolen child, had tried to do right by that child while living with constant guilt, had planned, in her own way, to make amends. She was a good person, Lorraine said quietly. She loved Sofia. That's what matters. I think she'd be happy to hear you say that. Catherine stood to leave. One last thing, Maria's journal. I found it after she died. She documented everything about Sofia's childhood, every milestone, every achievement, every moment. I thought, if you wanted, you could read it. It won't give you back the years you lost. But it might help you understand who Sofia was becoming. Catherine left the journal, a thick leather-bound book filled with a mother's careful observations. That night, Lorraine stayed up reading about her daughter's childhood, about her first steps, her first words, her first day of school, about the questions she asked, the fears she faced, the dreams she shared. It was bittersweet, reading about a life she should have witnessed. but it was also a gift. A window into the daughter she'd lost. A connection to the years that had been stolen. The next morning, Lorraine called Sofia. "I want to show you something," she said. "Something that might help you understand Maria better. Understand why she loved you the way she did." They met at the cafe in the North End, their usual spot. Lorraine brought the journal and the letter. Sofia read both in silence, tears streaming down her face. "And I was so angry at her," Sofia whispered. "When I found out the truth, I felt like my whole childhood had been a lie, like she'd been complicit in stealing me from you." "She was complicit," Lorraine said honestly, "but she also loved you. Both things can be true." "How do you do that?" Sofia asked. "How do you hold space for the complexity? How do you forgive the people who hurt you while still acknowledging what they did was wrong?" "I don't know that I have forgiven anyone yet," Lorraine admitted. "Not fully, not Dominic, not his father, not the system that let all of this happen. But I'm trying to see people clearly, to understand that humans are complicated, that we're all capable of both tremendous love and terrible harm, sometimes at the same time." Sofia closed the journal carefully. "She wanted to tell me, all those years, she wanted to tell me the truth, but she also wanted to protect you from the guilt, from the danger of knowing, from the pain of understanding you'd been taken. She made choices based on what she thought was right. They weren't perfect choices, but they were made out of love." "Do you think I can be that kind of mother someday?" Sofia asked suddenly. "The kind who makes hard choices and lives with the consequences." Lorraine took her daughter's hand. "I think you already are. You chose to find the truth even when it would have been easier to live with the lie. You chose to build a relationship with me even though it complicated your life. You chose Marco even when everyone told you it was too dangerous. Those are hard choices, and you're living with the consequences every day." "I'm pregnant." The words came out in a rush. 2 months. Marco and I just found out last week. We weren't planning it, weren't ready, but... Her voice broke. "I'm terrified. Terrified I'll mess it up. Terrified they'll take my baby like they took you from me. Terrified I'll turn out like Maria, loving my child, but always hiding the truth." Lorraine felt a flood of emotion so intense she couldn't speak for a moment. A grandchild. She was going to be a grandmother to Sofia's child. The cycle was continuing, but this time it could be different. "You won't mess it up," Lorraine said firmly, "because you're not alone. You have Marco. You have me. You have Marcus and Keisha and their children. You have Catherine and the memories of Maria. You have a whole family now, messy and complicated and built from broken pieces, but family nonetheless. Will you?" Sofia hesitated. "When the baby comes, will you be there? Will you help me figure out how to do this?" "Every step of the way," Lorraine promised. "I missed 40 years of being your mother. I'm not missing a moment of being your child's grandmother." They sat together in the cafe as the morning light streamed through the windows, planning for a future that felt both terrifying and full of possibility. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to their story. But inside that cafe, 2 women who'd lost 40 years were finding their way back to each other, one careful step at a time. 6 months later, Lorraine stood in Sofia's nursery, rocking her newborn granddaughter, while Sofia slept in the next room. The baby, Amara, they'd named her, meaning grace, in multiple languages, had Lorraine's eyes and Sofia's nose and Marco's dark curls. "Your mother is going to be amazing," Lorraine whispered to the sleeping infant. "She's brave and smart and so full of love. And your grandmother, the one who couldn't be here to meet you, she loved your mother with everything she had. She made mistakes, but she tried her best." Amara yawned, her tiny hand gripping Lorraine's finger with surprising strength. "You're going to grow up in a complicated family," Lorraine continued softly. "You're going to have cousins who are technically your aunts and uncles because family trees got confused. You're going to have a grandfather who's trying to be better than his own father was. You're going to hear stories about loss and secrets and people who made terrible choices for complicated reasons. But you're also going to grow up knowing where you come from. All of it, the good and the bad, the love and the loss, the beauty and the pain. We're not hiding anything from you. We're not protecting you from truth. We're going to give you the whole messy story and trust you to find your own way through it. Behind her, the door opened quietly. Sofia stood there in her robe, watching. "Did I wake you?" Lorraine asked. "No. I just wanted to see you two together." Sofia crossed to them, running a gentle hand over Amara's head. "My mother and my daughter. Two people I thought I'd never have." "You have us now," Lorraine said. "And we're not going anywhere." In the months that followed, Lorraine's life transformed in ways she'd never imagined. Marcus and Sofia developed a close bond, discovering shared interests in technology and chess. Keisha, initially wary of Sofia's wealth and connections, found in her sister a fierce ally who understood what it meant to navigate spaces where you didn't quite fit. Dominic remained at the edges of their lives, present but careful, always aware that trust had to be rebuilt slowly. He set up college funds for Marcus's and Keisha's children without being asked. He visited Amara regularly, his eyes filling with tears every time he held his granddaughter. He was trying, genuinely trying, to be better than his father had been. The organization changed too. With the old guard either in prison or stepping down, younger members took over. They focused on legitimizing the businesses, cutting ties with the worst of the criminal enterprises. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about this world ever would be perfect. But it was different. Better, maybe. In small, incremental ways. Lorraine kept working at Bella Rosa, though now she owned a share of it, a gift from Dominic that she'd initially refused, but eventually accepted when Sofia pointed out that it represented her labor, her decades of making the restaurant successful. She still served tables, still chatted with regular customers, still made sure everyone who came through the door felt welcome and seen. But now, 3 mornings a week, she closed the restaurant early and hosted what she called family breakfast. Marcus, Keisha, Sofia, Marco, and whoever else wanted to come would gather around table 7, that same table where so much of this story had begun, and share a meal together. They talked about everything and nothing, about Amara's latest milestone, about Marcus's new job at a non-profit Sofia had helped him get connected with, about Keisha's improved health now that she had access to better medical care, about the wedding Marco's sister was planning, about Dominic's latest attempt to prove he was worthy of their trust. They argued sometimes. About politics, about parenting, about whether it was ethical to accept money that came from questionable sources, about how to navigate the complicated legacy they'd all inherited. But they showed up. Week after week, they chose to show up for each other. One morning, exactly 1 year after the wedding, Lorraine arrived early to find Dominic already there, sitting at table 7 with a small wrapped box. "I wanted to give you this before everyone arrived," he said, sliding the box across the table. Inside was a key, old, brass, worn smooth with age. "It was to my apartment," Dominic explained. "The one I had 43 years ago. The one we were going to move into together before—" He stopped himself. "I kept it all these years, couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It was the only physical reminder I had of what we almost were. Why are you giving it to me now?" "Because I'm ready to let go. Not of you, not of Sofia, not of our family, but of the past, of the what-ifs and the might-have-beens, of the anger and the revenge, and the need to make everyone pay for what was taken from us." Dominic met her eyes. "You taught me that. You and Sofia. You showed me that healing isn't about destroying what hurt you. It's about building something new from the pieces." Lorraine turned the key over in her hand, feeling its weight. "What do you want from me, Dominic? Forgiveness?" "No. I know I don't deserve that. I just want—" He struggled for words. "I want you to know that meeting you, falling in love with you, having Sofia with you, that was the best thing I ever did. Everything after was just me trying to survive losing you. And I want to stop surviving and start actually living. Not in the past, not in regrets, but here, now, with our daughter and our granddaughter and this strange, beautiful family we've somehow created from all the broken pieces." Before Lorraine could respond, the door opened and the rest of the family began to arrive. Sofia with Amara in a carrier, Marcus with fresh pastries from the bakery down the street, Keisha with her kids, their laughter filling the quiet restaurant. They gathered around table 7, and as Lorraine looked at them, these people connected by blood and loss and choice, she felt something she hadn't felt in 4 decades. Peace. Not the absence of pain or the erasure of the past, but the ability to hold all of it, the grief and the joy, the mistakes and the miracles, the loss and the love, and keep moving forward anyway. The story of Lorraine and Dominic and Sofia didn't end with that breakfast. It continued, messy and complicated and real, full of setbacks and small victories, conflicts and reconciliations. They didn't live happily ever after, because life doesn't work that way. But they lived together, as a family built on truth instead of lies, on choice instead of obligation, on the understanding that sometimes the greatest act of love is not protecting people from pain, but walking through it with them. And on quiet mornings at Bella Rosa, when the city was just waking up and the light was soft and golden, you could find them there at table 7, a Mafia boss trying to redeem himself, a waitress who'd survived 4 decades of grief, a daughter who'd been stolen and found her way home, and the next generation who would inherit their story and, hopefully, write a better ending. It wasn't the family any of them had planned for, but it was the family they had. And sometimes that was enough.